Welcome to Politics Unusual. I'm Morgan McKay. It's been 1 month since Mayor Zoran Mamdani took office. So first up, we're speaking with the new Department of Transportation Commissioner, Mike Flynn, about the recent snowstorm and his vision for the city's roads. Next, we're sitting down with Andrew Rein from the Citizens Budget Commission to discuss the massive budget deficit and who's really to blame. Then we're taking a look at issues facing New Jersey residents. But first, New York City this past weekend was hit with one of the biggest snowstorms in about 5 years. And like most things, snowstorms are, of course, political, and how an administration handles its first snowstorm is important and closely watched. New Yorkers have a long memory. So joining us now to discuss the snowstorm and more is the city's new transportation commissioner, Mike Flynn. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Morgan.
So I know the Department of Transportation doesn't handle all things snow on the roads, but how do you feel like the administration handled its first snowstorm?
Well, you're right. It's definitely, it takes teamwork, and there was a lot of close coordination. The mayor was very involved, the deputy mayors, the agencies getting together on a regular basis to kind of see how we're doing, see how we can recalibrate and improve. I think on the whole, it went pretty smoothly, especially given what you said. It's been a while, right, since we had a snowstorm this big.
Now, the sanitation department, for those who don't know, handles clearing snow from public streets and crosswalks, but the transportation department is in charge of clearing off bus stops with covered shelters. How is that effort going?
That's right. Yeah, it's a little bit nuanced, right? Bus stops, about 3/4 of bus stops don't have a bus shelter, and those are the responsibility of the property owners there. So we definitely need them to meet that responsibility. The bus stops that have the shelter, we have a contractor, a JC Deco, and that's their responsibility. As of a couple days ago, all of those bus stops had been cleared, but they're going back and doing another round because, you know, what we saw happen. You clear it, maybe the street gets plowed again because it's snowing for a while, and then you need to clear it again.
I was going to say, some people have been posting to social media pictures of some of the bus stops and people complaining, you know, they still haven't been cleared off yet. But I guess what sort of lessons did you learn from this past snowstorm? And are there any more efforts to clear off this layer of ice, I guess, that's accumulated now at some of these bus stops? Are you guys looking at ways to make sure that all of those are cleared off in case there is more snow this weekend?
Absolutely. I think, so as you mentioned, Department of Sanitation goes out and plows the roads. We and some other agencies give them help. They focus on the major corridors first because we want to make sure that emergency vehicles and buses can get through. We talked about clearing the bus stops. Likewise, the pedestrian ramps at the corners are the responsibility of the property owners there. But we know with the plowing, you kind of get this thing with these piles of snow, right? And I get it. I understand as a New Yorker who walks and takes transit, the frustration when you feel like you need to climb over these. I think the expectation has changed over time now. The city really prioritizes pedestrians and transit riders, and they have higher expectations, and I think we need to meet them. So we're working closely with the mayor and our partners at other agencies to kind of figure out how we can improve our processes for the next storm so that bus stops, sidewalks, crosswalks, those kinds of things can be cleared even more quickly.
You've been in the job for a month now. What are you excited about tackling first?
I'm really excited about fast buses, fast and free buses. Hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers rely on buses, and they're disproportionately lower income, and a lot of older New Yorkers, women, caregivers, and the buses are too slow. And I think there's a huge opportunity. We've seen some great projects over the last decade, but I think we can really double down and meaningfully save New Yorkers time and money in their daily lives. And I'm really excited. We'll have some big ideas to share on that in the coming months.
I was going to say the state legislature and the MTA handle whether or not to make the buses free. But one idea that's been tossed around in terms of revenue has been turning those free parking spots into paid parking spots. What is your take on this?
You know, in a city as dense and as busy as New York, our streets and our curbside space are some of the most in-demand space, right? And there's so many different uses that we have to balance, and there's so many more now even than there were 10 or 20 years ago. We have, we're containerizing trash, right? That's going to help keep the rats away. We have the outdoor restaurants. We'll have secure bike parking in the future. This is all in addition to people being able to store their vehicles, right? So a lot of different uses, a lot of different competing demands that we need to balance. We have metered parking in a lot of the most in-demand parts of the city. That helps manage the demand. It's a best practice in the industry. We're only starting to look at other options, but I think we're definitely interested in ideas that can manage the demand at the curb, because ultimately it'll reduce the amount of time drivers have to spend circling. It'll reduce double parking, which causes congestion and can lead to crashes. So I think all ideas are on the table.
There is such limited parking right now as it is, but I know that's been a popular idea so far. Now, Mamdani also wants to see buses go faster, which you mentioned, and this is where the transportation department comes in. And some of the ideas that I've heard tossed around have included prioritizing bus signals and also moving the bus stop to like a center island to have it people load on and off faster. Where do you guys stand on some of these proposals?
Absolutely. We've been kind of evolving and innovating with our bus priority toolkit in recent years, with things like you mentioned, having the signals be able to change basically to help the buses keep moving, dedicated bus lanes, or even like what we see on 14th Street, bus ways, which basically allow other traffic but kind of not through traffic, and that really helps the buses move a lot faster. You mentioned also what we would call center running bus lanes, where the islands are in the middle. In general, that can help buses move a lot faster because they're not competing with as many turning vehicles and things like that. They kind of have really their own dedicated space. So yeah, I mean, all of those and more are things that we'd like to explore.
Now, the Adams administration was legally required to construct 150 miles of protected bus lanes, and they only built about 28 miles of the required 150 miles. Where do you guys stand on this? Are you trying to expedite this to make up for some of that lost time?
Definitely. Part of what we'll be doing is, like I said, kind of dusting off things that were paused or canceled. But we're very aware of these mileage targets that we have, and we're going to be doing our best to significantly expand our output. At the same time, I think it's really important to also think in terms of the outcomes. Basically, how does it impact people's day-to-day lives? You know what I'm saying? So other than just the mileage that we're building, how is it affecting bus speeds? How much time is it saving people? How much money can we save people? Are crashes being reduced? Those are things that I think are more meaningful to everyday New Yorkers, maybe than the miles that we're building, which is important. So you'll see us sort of talking about both of those. And we have an update to what we call our streets plan, which is kind of our citywide plan for these types of things. And it's going to have a strong emphasis on those types of impacts on New Yorkers' lives as well.
The city last year launched a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit for e-bikes. How has that been working? What's the enforcement been like?
I think it's been working okay. I think it's obviously an issue that's has elicited strong reactions from New Yorkers. It's been a lot of change we've seen out on the street with a lot kind of this expansion of e-bikes and other higher speed devices. At DOT, our approach is we're focused on basically making it as safe as we can. So how we design the streets, how we design the intersections, how we reduce conflicts between those users and others, basically bring speeds down to a safe level. And then there's sort of a regulatory side, right? Especially with the delivery cyclists, they're under a lot of pressure to make as many deliveries as quickly as they can, and that's kind of baked into the way that their setup is with these app companies. And so there's a regulatory side too about how can we reduce those incentives for basically delivery cyclists to feel that they have to go as fast and make as many deliveries as they can.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I really appreciate your time coming on here.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you. Coming up next, Mayor Mamdani staring down a $12 billion city budget deficit. We're looking at who the mayor is blaming and how he plans to fix it. Welcome back to Politics Unusual. Mayor Zoran Mamdani announced this week that the city is facing a $12 billion budget gap over the next 2 years. And while there are many looming questions as to what this means and what's next, there's also maybe the biggest question, which is, how did this happen? So joining us now to discuss is fiscal expert and watchdog Andrew Rein with the Citizens Budget Commission. Thank you so much for being here and welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start first with the Citizens Budget Commission is estimating that it's not going to be this big of a budget gap. What are you guys projecting?
The mayor is projecting $12 billion over 2 years. We project the budget gap to be slightly lower at up to $8 billion. But the truth is, no matter how you slice it, the gap is real. It will not magically disappear. It will take the administration's affirmative action to close it and solve this problem.
But how did it get to even $8 billion or $12 billion like the mayor's projecting?
What has happened over time is that the past administration and the one before it layered on new programs, expanded programs, but did not exercise the political will to go into agencies and find out what spending is not serving New Yorkers well and cut or reduce that spending or make government more efficient. So when you layer on spending you can't afford, eventually you hit a political wall, and that's the moment we're in today.
You are an expert on city and state budgets, so I'm going to break down Mamdani's arguments here with you. So first he says that it's former Mayor Eric Adams is to blame because he's saying that he underestimated the cost of certain services. But how does somebody, again, how does an administration undercut or undercount such a massive amount?
The Adams administration radically under-budgeted for known spending. For example, our housing vouchers this year will cost $1.2 to $1.4 billion, yet the adopted budget only included $600 million. That hid the nature of the problem, the extent of the problem, from normal people except for professionals like us. But that didn't cause the problem. The problem was caused by adding spending that ultimately we can't afford because we haven't had the will to shrink government spending that's not delivering for New Yorkers. We need to focus our money on priorities and not waste it on things that don't matter.
Now, the mayor is saying that, he's pointing fingers at former Mayor Eric Adams, but I feel like when you point one finger, you're sort of pointing fingers at other people, even though these are his political allies. He's saying, for example, he's not pointing his finger at the city council, but the city council is a co-equal branch of government that's responsible for reviewing and looking at the budget, approving the budget. You also have two fiscal watchdogs, the city comptroller, the state comptroller, whose job it is to catch something like this. And then on top of it, you've got the state's legislature last year, more than $500,000 they allocated for the office of the state deputy comptroller to provide oversight over the city's budget. So again, how does something like this happen? How does this slip past everybody and it just happens to land on Mamdani's desk a few weeks into his administration?
Well, in all fairness, there were at least 14 reports in 2025 from the Citizens Budget Commission, the Independent Budget Office, city and state controller, all saying we had a problem. While the magnitude differed a little, everyone said there was a problem. But when revenues are coming in strong, which they have been, it allows people to kind of ignore it and look at what they want to do aspirationally without making the smart, hard choices to ensure that those aspirations are sustainable into the future.
I asked the City Council's Finance Chair, Justin Brannon, about your guys' report at the end of last year, saying that there was going to be a pretty big budget gap, and he brushed it off, said this wasn't a concern. Do you think the council, though, is to blame for this budget gap?
Listen, the council and the mayor adopt a budget together. When those adopted budgets are not fully funding the programs to the extent that we all know they're going to afford, everyone has a hand in that responsibility. Yes, that's true. So let's move forward with Council Speaker Menon, Mayor Mamdani, and have a transparent budget that accurately reflects what we're going to spend and make sure that we're focusing our money where it matters and is sustainable in the long run, because that's what helps people.
Mamdani also blamed former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who hasn't been governor for the past 5 years, but he did blame him. And many fiscal experts say that the state has sort of shortchanged the city a bit in recent years, prior years. Hochul's tried to ramp that up. But do you feel like the state could give more to the city? Mamdani's saying the city's giving more than they're giving back.
There is a time-honored tradition where the state squeezes the city. It's not just, any certain administration, but it also goes both ways. Governor Cuomo froze local spending on Medicaid, which saved the city a lot of money, and squoze the city in other ways. We can go back to George Pataki enacting the Star tax cut program, which sucks money out of the city to the rest of the state. It's how it sometimes works. The mayor is right to advocate that New York is treated fairly, but he can also advocate to relieve himself from mandates that force him to spend money. For example, the state mandates lower class sizes in New York City. It's going to force him, tie his hands to spend $1 billion, mostly or primarily on schools that are high performing with wealthier kids. Let's give him the freedom to spend the money how he wants. Get rid of those mandates. That's another thing the state can do to help the city right now.
Mamdani says you can't find $12 billion in savings, so he is really pushing for an increase on taxes on millionaires and corporations. The Citizens Budget Commission is against this increase in taxes. Why is that? I guess help explain.
The mayor did yesterday sign an executive order to start finding those efficiencies, and we should back that and make sure we keep a close eye on it to make sure it's productive, not performative. But listen, New York State and its localities have the highest taxes in the nation. City residents, wealthy residents, pay the highest taxes in the nation. City business activity pays the highest taxes in the nation. It risks our ability to attract and retain those residents who disproportionately pay a lot of money for services and those businesses that create and grow jobs. We need to be attractive to people, not push them away. Raising taxes risks our competitiveness.
Is there also risk of raising taxes just to fill a budget gap rather than maybe continuing or expanding upon services?
The reality is we already spend as much money as we need. We need to spend it wisely. We can afford to deliver the services New Yorkers need, but no, we cannot afford to deliver services New Yorkers don't need, or we can't afford to have an inefficient government that's run like it was 50 years ago.
I know you'll be on top of it, so I'm excited to bring you back as things start to shape up with both these.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up next, a new law in New Jersey now holding parents responsible for their children's bad behavior. Coming up, how Garden State residents are reacting in tonight's Pulse of the People. Some new laws are on the books in New Jersey, including one that cracks down on disorderly behavior by young people. In one of his final acts as governor, Phil Murphy signed off on a bill that makes parents liable when their kids incite public brawls that lead to property damage. Parents could face a $1,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. We asked Garden State residents what they think of the new law.
I think it's good. It ensures that parents will be monitoring what their kids are doing.
And if they're 17 and a half going on 18 and they do something bad, then they should be held accountable for it. If we're talking about a 12-year-old, no.
As a parent myself, I think you have a responsibility to really be on top of what your kids are doing. And kids who break the law, there's something wrong with how they were raised.
Next up, we're going to test your knowledge of the tri-state region, so stay with us. Flashing back to this week in history, on February 1st, 1790, the United States Supreme Court met for the first time at the Royal Exchange Building on Broad Street. The meeting would be short because 3 of the newly appointed justices couldn't make it, so the meeting was delayed until February 2nd. It took 145 years for the court to find a permanent site. Finally tonight, we're testing your knowledge. Last week, we asked you, at what age are New York City residents eligible to run for a seat on the city council? The answer, 18 years old by election day. You must also be a U.S. citizen, a resident of the specific council district you intend to represent, and a registered voter in New York City. Now, to this week's question. Edgar Allan Poe wrote what famous poem while living in New York City? Now, don't Google the answer, but if you want to take a shot at it, go ahead, scan that code on your screen. That's going to take you to our website, fox5ny.com, where you can type in your answer, then check back here next week to see if you're right. That does it for this episode of Politics Unusual and Big News. If you missed any part of this show or just want to check it out again, we are now on Spotify and any other platform you listen to podcasts on. So be sure to follow us. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Morgan McKay. Have a safe night. We'll see you next week.